Okay, I'd like to call the Joint Special School Building Committee to order. This evening, we're going to be interviewing two candidates for the architect's position on the middle school project. Last evening, we interviewed three other companies, and on December 6th, we'll be making a decision as to which company. I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion about everybody's proposals and everybody's presentations. So before we get started, I'm sure there's some people, a lot of new people, so we'll introduce them for you. We'll start over there with 007.
Yes, I'm Dan Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the school district.
He's 007 because that's the last three digits of his phone number. He always says he's shaken, not stirred. I'm Sean Smith, Plant Ops Director.
Carl Dubois, Harvey Construction.
Marian Melizzi-Golia, member of the Board of Aldermen and former school board member.
Ernie Jetty, Alderman.
Patricia Klee, Board of Aldermen member.
And I'm Rick Dowd. I'm an alderman and the chairman of the Joint Special School Building Committee.
Laurie Wilshire, Board of Aldermen.
Ray Garino, Board of Education.
Heather Raymond, Board of Education.
Dottie Oden, Board of Education.
Bill Moser, Board of Education.
Okay, Mr. Moser is going to be on the phone tonight, and he'll interrupt if. And do you want questions as you go or at the end?
Yeah, I think we'll take them as we go. If there's anything that comes up that sparks conversation, please interrupt us.
So anybody that has a question, just try to flag down whoever's presenting so that they can call on you, and then we'll go with the question. So we planned for an hour, and we have someone else coming in, so if I start giving you a high sign, you'll know it's getting near the wishing hour.
All right.
Okay?
Should we close the door?
Yeah.
We get closing the door.
007, I think we got it.
Yes,
Oh,
because
sorry about
I can tell you the very next school project we have, like this one, the custodians are going to be given carts with pneumatic tires.
They're loud.
Okay, so again, the process is that we've selected a construction manager, Harvey, and Carl Dubois is representing Harvey. And then we'll be doing the architects. So having read your proposal, I know you are aware of the entire scope because you've done some preliminary work on this project. So if you'd introduce yourselves and then go right in your presentation.
Very good. Thank you very, very much. So we're really, really excited to be here tonight. Thank you very much for this invitation. We have a pretty incredible team of people here tonight, and we'll sort of introduce ourselves. And we've given, does everyone have a copy of the agenda that we handed out? There's sort of 7 highlights that we're going to try to capture on that. So if you don't, let us know, and we'll send one right down. Great. Great. We've got. We good? So the team, as Emily's passing that out, this is I've nicknamed the Incredibles. This team right here. So kind of like the cartoon characters, but even better. So we've got a core team that is familiar with the city of Nashua in the school department through the renovation projects we've done at Broad Street and Sunset. And from that core team, we've added additional skill sets with the folks that are here tonight. And so who's not here, that's behind the scenes, is Dan Bisson, who has spent a lot of effort and time on the previous projects and spent some time collaborating with me on the studies, the facility studies that we've done for Elm Street. But what we have here in the 4 of us is a unique skill set, and we represent Harriman. So my name is Mark Lee, and I'm a principal at Harriman and in the education studio. So it's what I've done for the last 20-something years, right out of high school, some might say, but just kidding. And so I'm an engineering background and an architectural background, and that kind of embodies Harriman. Harriman is an engineering and architecture firm, so we have all those disciplines in-house. And so we think that provides a great level of coordination when we do projects, but it also provides a level of expertise, and we all work together collaboratively. So we think that adds a lot of value. And with me in the educational studio are these fine folks, but Lisa Sawin is our educational planner, and so Lisa's got a tremendous amount of experience in the educational facility design. And Lisa and I just came back from an Association for Learning Environments conference to really kind of hone in our skills and keep sort of top profession on those. And Lisa, in addition to being a mother of two, also got her start in the woods of Vermont, practicing building architecture first before she really got into a practice like this. And so she sort of grew roots in sustainability. And so Lisa's sort of the educational planner, and also has actually had sort of a stint at teaching at the post-secondary level. So she's sort of worn hats in many areas, as well as incredible Jamie, who worked on the Broad Street and Sunset Heights projects. And so Jamie is the project manager on this project, and he's really the sort of guy who makes it all happen. And we call him Renaissance Man Jamie because he raises livestock and he makes wine, and in addition to being a registered architect. So Jamie's pretty incredible. And in addition to the architects and engineers, Harriman about 4 years ago acquired a urban planning and urban design studio in Boston, and Emily Innes is there. And incredible Emily also has sort of an interesting past, wearing trying out many different careers. And so she's tried interior design and finance in some respect, which she can describe better than I. But she now is at her last and best career, we say, and that is in urban planning. And so this particular project, we think, involves a component that's really important on the planning side. And Emily will share some of her expertise and thoughts on this project, or as it relates to this project. And so in addition to the sort of four Incredibles, we have a whole host of engineers and consultants that the two consultants that we highlighted in our proposal are the educational technology consultants. So the idea that we bring in expertise because technology is so constantly evolving. And so Doug Faria with Advanced Design, it sort of keeps abreast of everything that's happening as it relates to technology that supports curriculum. And so Doug is really the sort of foremost expert in New England on that. In addition, because security is such an important topic in today's school environments, while we think we can sort of understand best practices, we really bring in the expertise who have the credentials, and Pam Perini is an expert that we bring in for school security. And so it's just sort of those areas where we thought we needed a deeper dive in sort of our understanding of what needs to be done. Our approach to a project of this type is, particularly when it involves such an important community aspect, is that you've got to really be thorough and transparent on it. And we believe there are four, what we call them the pillars of a facility study. And these four pillars, we've actually started down that road with the educational program analysis, but educational programming is broader than what we've done to date, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We also do the facilities analysis, and that's when our engineers go in and we observe the building, we evaluate the systems, and we've started on that road as well. But we also think there are two really, really important pieces to that. One of them is sort of the energy analysis, and what we do is we look back and we calibrate sort of the buildings to an energy model that our engineers develop, our mechanical engineers use. And so that way we can predict what the new building systems are going to provide in terms of savings when you're done the renovations or new construction. And so while that's really important because it provides, to the next piece, which is the financial analysis, it provides real-time sort of understanding of how is our savings going to pay us back over the long run. So is there a payback in 20 years at the end of the bond that actually becomes extremely important when you're talking to the community about why you would do a certain direction, whether it's to build new or to renovate. And so that financial analysis, we have a CPA in our firm, and he's helped develop. He's what I call the the wizard of Excel, and he's developed these charts that help us look at your operating costs, maintenance costs, and we calibrate that again with energy analysis. And so those 4 areas we think are fundamental to give you folks the information that you need to have that conversation with the community on what the right outcome for this project is. Jamie's going to talk a little bit about what our understanding of the project is from the amount of the facility studies that we've done. And so incredible, Jamie, would you take it away?
Sure, thank you. So we did a facilities analysis for the Elm Street School, and during that process, we basically analyzed everything in this building that was there, and what we found through our engineering, and not only through our engineering, but also during interviews with the teachers and staff, is that the number one problem that they found with Elm Street School, the biggest deficiency, was the mechanical systems, the heating and the indoor air quality. So saying that is one of the big items that we'd look at first to having to replace in the existing schools. Say you were, yes?
I hate to interrupt, but every time someone new speaks, we have somebody transcribing it.
Yes.
Just repeat your name every once in a while so they get familiar with the voice.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So this is Jamie Willett. In the mechanical systems, we look at replacing boilers. If you were to keep the existing Elm Street School, the boilers need to be replaced. All the heating systems. Not only that, but the electrical systems are well dated. The school goes back to the last renovation was in '91. A lot of systems in the electrical system are gone. They've advanced quite a bit. Technology is a good example. In '91, the technology was way different than it is nowadays. Even lighting is another example where most lights now are LEDs for energy savings and cost savings. Another system where we find some deficiencies is the structural system. The existing system, the existing building is could potentially have some additions. So you would have to upgrade then. If you touch 10% of the existing building, it triggers basically a lateral and reinforcing upgrade of the entire structure system. So that's likely to happen if you're looking at putting additions onto the building. And then if you put new rooftop units or anything like that, you also are going to have to do upgrades to the structural system. It gets quite costly quickly. So the mechanical system can approach 30% of renovation costs. The electrical, is maybe in the 10% range. Structurals, maybe in that 10% range. So upwards, right? Those first 3 columns are 50% of your renovation budget potentially. And then we go into the building envelope. The existing 1935 building and the 1961 building, I calculated the walls that are there based on our discovery of, it was in the R3 to R5 range. Interestingly, new buildings like we would design would be closer to an R. It depends on what decisions the owner decides on, but anywhere from, let's say, R25 to R35. But code is R20. You don't always want to design to the minimum. The technology advances and the codes keep changing, so R20 today may be completely, obsolete in another 10 years. So the building envelope here, if we're dealing with an R3, R5, we'd have to look at, or could look at potentially adding some insulation. It's not the most efficient in a renovation because you're not putting a new air vapor barrier and all that, but it is doable to help increase energy savings. One quick point I want to talk about is if you increase the insulation on the roof, we saw at Sunset Heights when we were working there that triggered, you're basically holding more snow, which triggered reinforcing there. So we ended up having to reinforce the structure. Some of you may remember that at Sunset Heights, so that the additional insulation to help keep your energy costs down, so forth. You get what I'm saying there. So final item quickly on the building systems is accessibility. This school has some elements of accessibility, and not everything is in the worst shape, but there are many areas, especially 91's closer to when codes for accessibility or laws were starting to take place. But before then, toilets, casework, all those type of things, and then some retrofitting I'm sure has happened based on the study, but there needs to be more advancement. In fact, you need to spend about 20% of your total renovation budget is required to be spent on accessibility, so.
Thank you, Jamie. This is, again, this is Mark Lee for the transcriptionist. And the next part that we, again, talked about on the pillars is the academic or curriculum programming, the educational programming piece. And in our first review of Elm Street, as we were doing the pass at understanding it and its systems, one of the first things we did was we spent a couple days in the school with the staff, interviewing everyone, understanding what their perception of the school was in supporting curriculum and educational practice. And we compared that with what our best practices are in middle school designs. And Lisa's going to talk a little bit about those best practices after this slide. But one of the big things is that in a middle school, one of the big elements is you're moving from the smaller elementary school model where the classroom becomes the primary unit to a more social-based structure, and the idea of trying to break the school down into more familiar team-based organizations. And you're doing that. There are about 14 teams right now at Elm Street. And the idea is to actually have the building architecture itself support that model. And right now it doesn't. It sort of, as you all know, was the high school before and has a very traditional layout of corridors and classrooms. And so that's one of the big things that, in talking to the administration, that they thought was an important impediment right now to how they operate. Another thing is that as we look at 21st century learning, we understand that more and more happens in flexible spaces that are outside of the classroom as a primary learning unit. And those group rooms, they reflected, there are few and far between. That's something that you probably can overcome in a renovation, but it requires more space and really thinking about how you might modify the existing school layout. Right now, one of the big things is that the Elm Street School houses a fair amount of the district's special services programs, the Project Achievement and Bridges programs, and those right now are in old industrial art spaces. And so while they felt like they were a really great location in terms of being somewhat quieter and off the beaten path, they're really in converted spaces without windows that are relying on skylights to provide light into the spaces, and climate is an extreme issue, just as Jamie suggested, in those issues as well. And so there's an important equity issue there that would need to be addressed either in renovation or new construction. As I said, also the emotional development of sort of the middle school student is a critical difference in terms of thinking about this particular population and how a facility responds to it. And thinking, about corridors, and what we understand is that from the old high school, the corridors are somewhat narrow, and those become problem areas. And when you think about lockers in those areas, they can also become behavioral issues. And so we want to provide safe, emotional learning and development spaces in schools. And Lisa will share some ideas of what new school thinking is with that regard. Of course, you have the modulars at the current site, and that's an equity and safety issue, and so that certainly would be addressed in any of the projects going forward. And then certainly safety, as I talked about, safety and security is an important aspect that we looked at as well. So I'm gonna turn it over to. So this is sort of some of our findings, but the idea is then to learn from this as it rolls into the next development of the project. So Lisa Sawin, our educational planner, is going to speak a little bit about best practices. Lisa.
Thank you, Mark. To borrow Mark's words, I'm the incredible Lisa Sawin, also the educational planner for Harriman. And I, as a thought leader in K-12, actually pre-K through 12 architecture, I'm well-versed and experienced in the best practices for middle school design, especially where it comes to fostering 21st century learning. As my colleagues can attest, and anyone that works with me, I am extremely passionate about creating inspiring educational environments for our youth. I continue to refine my expertise, whether it be through speaking engagements or my involvement in A4LE, which is the Association for Learning Environments, which Mark mentioned. We just returned from their national conference out in Chicago. Incredibly inspiring conference, really highlighting the current best practices in educational design, but with in particular emphasis on safety and security, because that's at the forefront of everyone's mind today. Up here you can see the 10 best practices in middle school design strategies. We have classroom communities, distributed dining, social emotional learning, campfire watering hole, STEM, STEAM lab, art, music, transparency, natural light, learning commons, outdoor connection, welcoming entry. Now, before I get into detail about what these mean for middle school design, I want to pause for just a minute and have everybody think back to what it was like to be in middle school. Think about what your middle school was like, what the name of your school was, maybe what the mascot was, what the interior space looked like, cafeteria, hallways, who your friends were. But then think about all the changes and the rapid changes and growth that you were going through at that time. As a student, you were rapidly growing. You were really looking to foster social relationships. But you were also working on critical thinking and really looking at decision-making and what it took to make those decisions. But you're also looking for your identity and your purpose. Now fold in the complexity and the advancements in technology, social media, and everything else our youth is faced with today. And it becomes ever so more important that these educational environments support this transition and development of our students, so they're not only surviving this change, they are thriving through this change. And so that's the first practice here is classroom communities. And this is where we really look at that shift from education, elementary education, and you have that safety and security of that single classroom. You have a sole instructor, a trusted advisor, and now you're going into a large school. You have multiple teachers, you have multiple classrooms, you have transitions between classrooms, you're juggling multiple subjects. So with classroom communities, we really look at taking that large school and breaking it down into smaller schools, smaller communities, a smaller cohort of teachers, of peers, of supporters. And so you can see in the graphic up here, it's really looking at how do you organize those classrooms to create that shared community, and you can see that in this picture here. Another way to emphasize that idea of breaking down the larger school into smaller schools to really help these students with this transition is this idea of distributed dining. And what that is when you think about that cafeteria, how large it is, how many people are in that, you're trying to navigate all of these social relationships, everything that's happening. Sometimes that's really overwhelming for students, and particularly students with special needs. It can be very overwhelming. They need a different type of space. Different students thrive in large groups, some not. So this idea is where you have a central cafeteria where you have your main kitchen, full cooking kitchen, and then you have these satellite dining areas. And so they're distributed within these smaller communities throughout the school, and they have more of a warming kitchen. But it's this idea of really breaking down that cafeteria. But it also works as flexible space. So when they're not being used as a dining facility, they can be used as a team teaching area. They can be used as a project space. So there's a lot of variety that you can get out of that. The social emotional development is critical at the middle school ages. So we really look at providing a variety of spaces. Right here, this is showing what a campfire space is. So it's that idea of you're all gathering around, you're listening to a story, you're learning from somebody's experiences. So creating that sort of space where people can gather in small groups and share ideas. The watering hole. So this idea where you can pull off, or whether it be peer tutoring, it can just be social interaction, learning from one another, really creating those impromptu areas where students can gather and learn and really work on those soft skills that are really important in 21st century skill sets. Then we have STEAM and STEM labs. What we're seeing in middle school right now is, actually in high school, we're seeing that schools are really looking to reinvigorate the VOTEC, or career technical education. And they're looking to middle school to introduce those career paths or those skill sets early on. And they're doing this through STEM or STEAM labs, which is they're looking to find areas to where the kids have resources to science, engineering, the arts, math, and then technology to support those ideas and bringing them all together in different projects. And we understand that you guys already have VOTEC programs within your school, and we would really look to integrate those, have them more accessible, have them more transparent to the students so they are more, it's more on display, more accessible. They can see what is happening. They're exposed to more of these skill sets, and then create opportunities for collaborating between them. The arts and music. So making sure that students have access to appropriate spaces for art and music. Art spaces with great natural light, music spaces that have great acoustics both in the room, but also have great acoustic separation from the rest of the school. In this conference we just went to, there was a great quote that they told us that education devoid of the arts is a half-brained education. So I thought that was a pretty fun way to look at it. So these are just different examples of art and music spaces that we've designed over the years, really providing the different areas to work on the different arts, whether it be ceramics or painting or drawing, and then great natural light. Learning Commons. So the idea of the library has developed tremendously over the years. And really, the Learning Commons is about providing access to multiple forms of resources, whether it be books or technology. And the librarian is more about helping these students make these connections across all these different types of information to further their thoughts and critical thinking. Transparency and natural light. So when we talk about transparency, it's not just about windows, but it's about really this idea of making sure that we are trusting our students and helping them foster independence at this age. So as Mark talked about, the hallways become a very active learning space. So having visibility from the classroom to the hallways and vice versa. If kids are able to peel off in the hallways, do small group learning, the teacher can see them and trust that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And vice versa, students have visibility into the classroom and can see, oh, my friend's working on that. That's really neat. I want to find out more. Natural light, there's tons of studies that just show how natural light helps us retain information, be more engaged, and just the connection to outdoors. Naturally, we all have an ingrained connection to the outdoors, and it not only the natural light, but that connection, the interior environment of these schools really fosters a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and kids really start to take pride in their school, and they will feel more safe to come forward with things because it is their home, their place. They will report when things are just out of place, and it really just fosters that sense of community. Yes?
How do you, so natural light is good, obviously. So security is another concern. How do you balance that? Those two issues? Absolutely,
that's a great point. So most people think that more windows makes people more vulnerable to events, when it's actually, a lot of studies are showing us that visibility is one of the most important deterrents to a situation. You want to be able to have eyes on anybody that's coming into the space, but there's also that concern about, well, how do you get out of the line of sight? So in classrooms specifically, what we're starting to do is you have your visibility into the classroom, but then we look at the sight lines and where are those areas where kids can get out of view, and we change the flooring material. So if you have VCT, let's say, in your floor, it's gray over here, but then there's a big red area at a diagonal that's out of the line of sight, everybody knows to get on the red tiles in the event of a lockdown. Does that address your question?
Yeah. Bulletproof glass, film, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and
incorporate those.
We will. Yes, we foster with our security consultant. We will facilitate a conversation with all the stakeholders around your approach and policies on safety and security. And it depends on the school and the community as to how you want to approach that. Some communities at the entryways, we have done bulletproof glazing. We've done bulletproof walls at the reception area. And we've also done films. We've taken several measures to address that, but that will be a very involved conversation throughout the process.
You know, one of the primary strategies is the delay that you cannot make, unless you're really interested in building a fortress. The idea is to create time for first responders to react, and that's really the idea of putting films on and school guard glazing type things and we've done some analysis on about 4 or 5 different products that show the different delay times. We're working with a school district in Massachusetts on developing standards for their classroom security windows and the films and the type of film they should use. We can certainly share that with you.
Yeah, we have some great videos on just showing that delay response. And Mark's right, it's about slowing it down and creating that time for the authorities to get there and lessening the response times, whether it be panic buttons to where we can have them distributed throughout the school so that teachers can activate them and get the authorities there as quickly as possible. So welcoming entry, we definitely want to create a single secure point of entry from a safety and security standpoint, but also make sure that's a really welcoming entry. This really embodies the energy, the culture, and the community of this school. And kids just thrive on this. This is a middle school in Westbrook, Maine. Actually, I think we partnered with Harvey on this project. And that tree was part of the Percent for Art, but it is such an incredible space within the foyer, but then has these great connections to all the spaces around it. So when you're in it, you have a very good understanding of where you are at the school at all times. And so throughout this process, I will facilitate a visioning session with all the stakeholders on looking at best practices, looking at guiding principles, looking at design patterns that are important to your community. And we will create a common language and develop a design statement that really embodies what is a middle school in Nashua, New Hampshire. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mark, who's going to take you through some examples of equity exercises we've done on other projects.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Again, this is Mark for those following at home. We've got 3 items left on our agenda, so I'm gonna try to sort of be cognizant of giving enough time for everyone because we've got some pretty good stuff to cover still. So in terms of equity, one of the important considerations for this project, we don't think of it as the Elm Street Middle School project. We actually think of it as the Nashua middle school projects because it's more than just Elm Street. It's really looking at Pennachuck and it's also looking at Fairgrounds and understanding what does equity mean across all of those. And so as we look at this, it's sort of the lens, and it's similar to a project we're doing right now. We're working on 4 projects for another school district, and they've got some brand new schools, and the idea is equity doesn't mean identical. Equity means there's an equity of resources and experiences, and that's the lens that which we want to do. So the first thing we did there was we actually went on a tour of the entire district schools, and we had a criteria of different equity items to evaluate the different schools on to make sure that at the end of the project that we're really hitting the mark in terms of that every school has sort of an equal basis in resources for the students across the Nashua School District. So in thinking about that, again, here's sort of the sort of map of looking at the where Pennachuck is in Elm Street and Fairgrounds, and of course Fairgrounds and Elm Street are very close to the center of the community and in more built-up areas, and a potential new site that of course you're familiar with. Starts to shift that energy a little bit and bring some important considerations into the mix in terms of potential for redistricting, and that really is an important consideration as we think about this. And so there's lots of different components to that. But what we do is we try to provide the information. So we see ourselves as facilitators in your conversation with the community, and we'll provide you all the information you need to have that dialogue. And we'll facilitate that whole conversation. We've got lots of great tricks that we use, and Emily's going to talk a little bit about those. But so as we think about your project and looking at it, and of course we have the different schools here, and you can immediately see from this graphic how tightly constrained obviously the Elm Street the current site is in its 8.8 acres or so, and the lack of resources that it does have. So the first thing that we started looking at is okay, the sort of immediate option is, okay, what would you do if you were to renovate the existing school? And you may, again, recognize some of this information from the proposal package that we sent you. But Jamie has spent a little bit of time thinking about what this option would give relative to the rest of the schools. And so, Jamie, would you like to just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, this is Jamie again, thank you. So in option A, we looked at preserving the historic portion of the Elm Street School, which is the 1935 wing off to the right. You've got that beautiful landscaped area that's got the nice pathways going in. We tried to preserve that. It's a really nice feature of the school. But what we did is kind of flipped it so that your main entry is at the new back end of the school becomes a secure entrance where you come in, the admin's down on the lower side. You have a bus loop up higher and a new parking lot and parent drop-off separated to help keep kids safe coming into the school through that new secure entrance. Just above that is a new cafeteria and kitchen area. The existing structure of the existing Elm Street kitchen cafeteria is failing, so we'd look at replacing that area too. And then just above there, there's a little area, 4-story area of classrooms to give some additional swing space for the classroom students, excuse me. So we have an equity chart on the right that kind of split up some of the different items that each one of the three middle schools have. And this really reflects kind of the existing conditions. The numbers might have shifted a little bit between the studies and whatnot, but basically at the Elm Street School, you're looking at about 1,000 students. It's a 191,000 square foot school without the auditorium, give or take. Fairgrounds is 700 students and about 120,000 square feet. And Pennachuck is 640 students, give or take, in a 97,000 square foot school. So that's split up pretty fairly. However, you start looking at the site. The site's really where I think the problem with Elm Street starts to become, and I think most everyone's aware. Parking is a big issue in Elm Street. You're working on just under 9 acres there. The other two schools have almost 20 acres. That's a pretty big difference, and they don't have an auditorium that you're trying to deal with for parking. So if you count all the parking spaces that you can around the school, including the street, which isn't always maybe available, then you get maybe a little bit closer, but it still has more students in an auditorium. Biggest problem, I think, with the Elm Street School is, and I would have guessed maybe not the biggest problem, but a very large problem is no play fields. No play fields, no basketball courts, or any of that outside. There's no place to go outside other than the courtyards and maybe that front lawn area. So in the next option, we said, okay, what if we take the existing Elm Street School and move the school to a whole new site in southern New Hampshire, or southern Nashua. So option B takes all those same student counts and puts them here. What do we gain? Well, we gain a bunch of play areas, more parking, bus loop, and all those other things, but more of them. Mark, there was something you wanted to say about the top of that site.
Well, I think what we started looking at when we analyzed the site, there's a couple things. One is that the access here on Cherrywood Drive is pretty constrained through a tight neighborhood, and so we actually looked at, is there an opportunity to have the primary drive over on the west edge of the campus, if you will, coming in. This could act as an emergency access, but that was one. There's sort of terrain issues in this where it's a little slopey in this area, and then we've got a little bit of wet area in here. So really, we felt that the developmental aspect of this lent itself well to creating sort of, this is the quieter edge of the site, and thinking about classrooms, and then thinking about public spaces and gymnasium closer to fields and laying the field out in that direction. So that was sort of our preliminary thinking when it comes to this. And in this model, again, this doesn't shift population to the other schools. This is a replacement of somewhere around 1,000 students for a middle school to replace Elm Street.
Right. So then in the next option, option C, we added some additions to Pennachuck and Fairgrounds to help balance the student population. So you'd shrink the new middle school a little bit to you don't have such a big population, but you still have all the play fields and all the parking and all that of the option B.
And so it's very, really difficult to see, but again, to replace the 4 modulars that are at Pennachuck, as well as to absorb potentially a few more students, it's really interesting. So if you think about just an addition of 4 classrooms, get you almost 100 students. And so it doesn't take a lot of area to be able to increase. So that's essentially a footprint of 2 classrooms stacked 2 stories. And so then we can start to shift and see. And the idea is to look more comprehensively, not just on the number of students, but also thinking about other amenities that may be desired at these schools. So the next piece we want to just, again, talk to you a little bit about. Oh, there's a question, Carl?
Yeah, can you go back to that slide just for a second?
Sure.
When you're talking equity and you're going to set, essentially establish 800 students per middle school, how does that play in when you got 640 at Pennachuck, go to 800 as far as cafeterias and the service corps? That's all going to be looked at too, I would assume, to make
Absolutely.
sure it's adequate.
That's a good point, Carl. So the idea is that these core spaces, and the core spaces are usually determined, that sometimes it's the cafeteria, the library are usually a function, the size of them is a function of the number of students in it. Even the kitchen itself becomes a function in the New Hampshire DOE standards. And so what we have to do is go back and look at what is the capacity of those to support those. And that's part of that equity checklist, to go through and make sure that you're not just adding them to make the numbers equal, but that idea of the experience is equitable as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I kind of piggybacking off that, one of the ideas with the new school would be that the students who end up at that school would have these great STEAM labs and art and music, and I know that our other schools don't have modern STEAM labs and modern technology the way that would be. So does your idea incorporate adding those kinds of things as well, kind of like taking a look at it holistically?
Absolutely. That's why when we say it's the middle schools project, it's not just the Elm Street School, it's the idea of looking through that lens, coming back to you folks and saying, here's what you're going to be as a result of this. So you have decisions to make, but we think that it is comprehensive in thinking about potential renovations to those schools as well.
Okay. Under the idea of the budget that we have.
And again, those will be tested out with, that's what's great about having the CM on board now, because that becomes Carl's problem. No, I'm kidding. But it's nice to have the resources, because in the end, it's really where does the community value those things, and it's their decision to make. We'll give you all the information you want, and it may mean, again, that if you build an 800-student Elm Street school, that's going to be less costly, obviously, and then that money gets distributed to the other schools for opportunities for renovations there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any estimates as to how many vehicles per day will be generated by an 800 student school?
Yeah, and I don't, because that's something that we bring our civil engineering into it, and so that's something I leave to Frank Crabtree and Sam Forg. They're sort of the numbers guys when it comes to trip generations. I don't want to put Emily on the spot here, but I don't know, Emily, if in your urban planning, do you have any sense of trip generation of that?
I don't, but that is part of good planning and looking at what that means for the neighborhood that surrounds the school and considering those implications. And we'll be talking a little bit about how you talk about the implications and the pros and cons of the choices that you need to make over time.
I mean, one of the considerations we looked at is Buck Meadow Road is a very, it feels like you're through pasture land, and it's a very rural road. And so the idea of what is the traffic going to look like if we shift it onto that roadway? So that's an important consideration. Yes.
I have a question. When you're talking about balancing the schools and putting some students over into Pennachuck, that's actually right around where I'm living. Right now, they're using trailers and so on because of the student population not being able to fit. So if you're talking about adding more, you would have to do some extreme changes to Pennachuck also.
That's absolutely right. And what you can't see it very well, but we showed kind of 2 orange dots here, if you will, on the classroom bar to accommodate both the modulars and portable classrooms that are there, as well as potentially shifting some population there to equal out the size of the schools.
I also want to tell the board members, joint special, when you speak, please mention your name too, because the transcriber's not going to know who's talking.
And we'd love to continue exploring those, but I want to give Emily an opportunity to speak here about our public engagement process.
So my name is
Emily.
Emily Ennis, and I'm excited to be here tonight to represent my incredible colleagues in urban planning and design. The questions that you have in front of you, my colleagues talked about the school and the fact that the school itself, Elm Street Middle School, is a community. The school system is a community, but a school is an asset to the larger community as a whole, the community of Nashua. And so as you look at the implications of, do you renovate a neighborhood school where it is now versus moving that neighborhood school, and what are the pros and cons of that, getting that larger community involved is important. And what we do is we do a basis of setting up the criteria for for that discussion. What is the base information? What are the pros and the cons of that? What are the implications of that? And frankly, what are the gains and losses to the different communities of whether or not the school stays or moves? So you see some of the voices that need to be involved in that discussion. And Mark, if you'll go to the next slide. Oh, it's right here. They moved it on me. So there's a couple of different ways of bringing people into the conversation. Lisa mentioned already some of the work that she'll be doing within this school, the Elm Street Middle School community itself. But there's that larger community. So all of the people, all the voices involved will be involved in community forums and will help to structure. Lisa and I will work together with our other colleagues to do that. And there's the opportunity also of collecting and distributing information online and collecting some of the voices in that. And so we'll be looking at how best to set up those criteria. And we used a couple of different ways. You'll see on the left this idea of setting up priorities and in fact cost information to it. So those choices that you have to make school by school, figuring out what that means in terms of dollar as well as in terms of educational value. We've also done things such as using ballots, giving people opportunities. In that case, you see opportunities for development, or allowing people to actually work with materials. In the lower right, you see people using a combination of Legos and Monopoly to think about development strategies for this particular group. That becomes important because Elm Street Middle School doesn't have a value just as a neighborhood school. If you should decide that you want to move the school elsewhere in the city, it has a value of its own as a historic structure that's anchoring a neighborhood. And so what do you do if the choice is to move the school? That appears suddenly as a loss to the immediate neighborhood. What can they gain out of that? So what you see up there is the school itself, quite a large structure that is really anchoring this neighborhood of smaller structures, smaller homes. And here is, that's actually from your GIS, and here is the data from your assessor's database. So you have green space, you have community space, you have performing arts. Can you do something new with that school? So I've partnered with my colleague Kartik Shah, who's a senior urban designer, and started to think, what are the options if the school moves? And with this historic green here, keeping the green, keeping the historic 1936 building, keeping the auditorium, do you have community space on the ground floor and housing above? And do you think about having housing that steps down to the density of the current neighborhood, two single-family homes there, maybe to match the school? You have a little bit more of a mid-rise there, thinking about how the site could be divided so that an existing street just flows through, and this large site now becomes part of an overall neighborhood. Another option, do you want to, given that the median age of Nashua is a little bit younger than the state as a whole, Nashua's proximity to 93 and the ability to commute to Boston, and how do you think about housing that is more affordable than, frankly, Massachusetts housing is at the moment in the draw there? Do you look, because this is an urban environment, as a slightly higher density here, and then tie the auditorium into a greater community center, maybe a community arts center, so that the neighborhood isn't just getting additional housing, they are retaining that community asset of the auditorium as well. And then thinking about that green, before we showed a little bit of passive recreation space, do you have a little bit more active recreation space that serves the neighborhood as a whole? These aren't answers, they're just explorations of a concept, but it's the type of thing that makes sense when you're considering a decision that has an impact, not again just on the school community, but on the larger community as a whole. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark.
And so I have to applaud, we did it, guys. We actually got through and given enough time for the fine folks here to ask some questions. And so we really are excited about this project. Again, we see it just not as the Elm Street, it's the middle school project. And we'd be excited to build on what we think of as a sort of a proud tradition and successful tradition of partnering with Nashua and with Harvey. We're really glad that you picked what we think as one of the best construction managers, certainly in the region. And so with that, we'd love to answer any questions that we haven't covered in our presentation. Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Moser, do you have a question?
Not at the time. I think Harriman had covered quite a lot of the information that I was expecting. And I really don't have anything at this moment to question them about.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you brought up, the possible alternatives for the existing building if we move the school, because recently we've had somebody come in and take a factory that is in far worse shape than the school and turn it into fantastic housing.
Absolutely.
And I know there are people looking or interested in that building if we decide to go the other way. My concern is twofold. One, when you're evaluating doing anything to Elm Street, there's a lot of risk and potential pitfalls that could add to huge costs. And I want to make sure that those are explored. And we've talked at length about Harvey going in there with a sledgehammer and unearthing some of the things that might possibly be causing added costs. And the other thing is that when we're looking at the sustainability and the life cycle cost of new versus renovation, I want to know what the 10, especially the 20-year savings is, and does that help support the cost of that school going forward?
Right.
So those are important characteristics that we want to look at.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dowd. I think all of those things are really important. Thinking about sustainability at the broadest level is the idea of sort of utilizing the resources throughout the community that you have, and not necessarily having to build new and tear down. That's the most sustainable thing you can do, is actually kind of reuse what you have. And what I said when I began with those 4 pillars is really to understand what are the economics involved in each of those decisions, so that again the community can sort of look at this and say, okay, where do we think the right choice is for our value system about whether to repurpose it as a school or repurpose it as another community structure? And again, it was great. We have, in addition to the credentials as a urban designer, our colleague Kartik Shah has sort of a background in real estate, and so he understands the real estate values and the strategies to maximizing the real estate that you have, both for potentially for housing or for other events.
Alderman Melissa Golian.
Thank you. I have a question related to security and design for security. And I know none of you are your security experts, but and Lisa, I'm going to direct it towards you only because it's in response to something you said. You talked about designing and looking at security to provide a better time, shorten the response time. And certainly that's important, but the other part of that is getting people out of the building and away from the building. So in my mind, that's the other important part of security. Old buildings where rooms are like totally landlocked and you're on the 3rd floor, you don't have many options.
Correct.
So what are your thoughts about that? And so, bulletproof glass is great and, glazing and all of that, but what about building circulation and design?
That's a great question. So we really look at every, entry into the building, in particular the main entry, but really looking at how somebody is moving through that building, and they're usually trying to move pretty fast. And so it's, again, about slowing them down. It's not just at the main entrance. It's about every series of doors that they encounter, whether they be on, automatic closures, how to really stop and slow down that individual. In regards to whether it's to get people out of the building or secure in place, that's a conversation we'll engage you in. So every school district, every community approaches their policy and procedures around safety and security differently. There's no right one way to do everything. So it's really about engaging the stakeholders, the staff, the superintendent, all of you folks here, as well as police and fire, and really looking at, in the event of emergency, how are you guys going to address whether it be secure in place or get people out of the building, or is it a mix of the two, and do we need to provide a variety of spaces to do that?
And this is, again, Mark for the, but I think the other thing that we want to look at is, in addition to the equity, it's not just looking at the security issues at Elm Street School, it's actually at all 3 of the middle schools as well. And so it's the idea that, and if you've been through the maze of corridors at Elm Street, it does not lend itself to getting out of that building very easily. We do have a lot of points of entry and exit, but there's a maze of corridors, particularly through the old industrial arts wing of it.
That's a great point, too. A lot of it's about wayfinding and making sure that it's a very clear, people have a very clear understanding of how to move about the school and how to get out in the event of emergency.
If I may, my question was not only in relationship to old or new, but thinking about old. So if we decide to do renovation,
absolutely.
Are there thoughts about that? Because those old buildings are awful.
Absolutely. And so that will be something that during both the equity review that we do and also the safety and security conversation, we'll walk through the school with the police, the fire, all the stakeholders, and really talk through, how do you guys handle lockdowns now? How would you like to handle them district-wide? And where are those opportunities for us to make changes?
One of the things that we studied in the existing is, if we create essentially the primary access routes would be essentially this ring of corridors right here, with this as the primary entry and exit point. So it goes up here, and this becomes a very important corridor that connects into the existing right at the T at the auditorium. But then that corridor comes over through this area right here and right between the cafeteria and next to the courtyards. And so it's really creating that, as Lisa said, that very, very clear sort of wayfinding that you can immediately identify, okay, yeah, I know where I am, I know how to get out.
Okay, we're getting really close to 8, and there are the other groups in the hall, but I have a couple more questions. Alderman Jetty and then Sean.
So there's been a lot of increased awareness about climate change and the effect that that we all have on that, and so this is a great opportunity, I think, to make sure that our effect is as minimal as possible. Can you talk about your experience and qualifications in guiding us in that area?
Absolutely. So there's a couple things. One, just kind of a shout out to my colleague Emily Innes on that regard, but then I'll follow it up on the energy side and sort of savings on that. So Emily, I'll let you quickly.
Yeah. So on the neighborhood planning side, sorry, thank you. This is Emily Innes again. On the neighborhood planning side, I'm a lead AP&D, which is the lead professional for neighborhood development. And then both I and my colleague Katie Moore are municipal vulnerability preparedness technical service providers, which is a long way of saying that we were trained in Massachusetts to talk about climate change and help communities understand the impacts of climate change on there. So we can certainly offer that expertise in general planning to our colleagues.
Right, and very quickly, so the other thing that we offer is because our mechanical engineer is integrated into our process and our building model, as I talked about at the beginning, we do this energy model. That energy model then tells us how much we're saving, how many pounds of carbon that we're actually saving in a renovation. And so we can actually look at both embodied and consumed energy in the project and give that information in a graphical way or certainly in a numeric way. We have a countless number of high-performing schools. We had one project, I think it's in our proposal, that was called the greenest school in New Hampshire. And so we have a countless projects that are LEED certified, schools that are LEED certified, and the like.
Sean? Oh, you all set?
Yes.
No, Sean?
Sean Smith. I think you kind of answered it. A lot of the other architects talked about being LEED certified and CHIPS program and stuff like that. You started talking about energy as well. To what extent do you integrate solar, geothermal, biomass, wind energy into your designs?
Yeah, we're really excited. We have a project that we did that's not only net zero, it's a high school, it's net positive, and so we actually employed techniques to actually consume less or to produce more energy than we're actually consuming in this school. And so it was the first net positive school in Maine, and we're pretty proud of that. We have, I don't know how many LEED certified projects, and 3 of us right here, just in this group, are LEED certified, and there are many more in the team that's working on your project. And so, like I said, we've been really proud to be called, or to the Idlehurst Elementary School that we did is it was called the greenest school in New Hampshire, using CHIPS, the high performance standards for school design.
Any follow-up?
Where's the net zero school?
That is in Clinton, Maine, and so it's the Goodwill Hinckley School.
And I just want to add to what Mark said. Not only do we look at the energy, but we also look at it as an educational tool too. So when we're looking at these sustainable systems, is how can we put them on display for the students? How can we integrate them into the curriculum? How do they get access to this data? So it's not just a feature of the school, but it's a hands-on learning tool as well.
Everybody else set? Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Very nice proposal and good presentation.
Great.
And as I said, we'll be making our decision soon, and we'll certainly be getting back to you.
Sure. We look forward to if you should happen to select the incredible team.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll take about 5 minutes to get the other team in here and all set up. Then I'll have you introduce your group and then go into the presentation. We have interviewed, you'll be the 5th company that we've interviewed for the architects. On December 6th, we'll be making a decision on who to select. And of course, it's a very difficult decision. Everybody is obviously very qualified. I'm going to have, like I said, people introduce themselves here. We have Mr. Moser's on the phone. So hopefully, if he has something to say, we'll let him know. By the way, this is being televised, and when you speak, make sure your microphone has the green light on, and speak into the microphone so that it can be picked up. And when you speak, please repeat your name and so that the transcriber will know who's speaking from your team. And I'll just remind everybody on the board to also identify themselves when they speak. Okay? We'll start right down here.
Hello, I'm Dan Donovan, the Chief Operating Officer for the school district.
Sean Smith, Plant Operations Director.
Carl Dubois, Harvey Construction.
Marian Malizzi-Golia. I'm one of the Board of Aldermen members on the committee, and I'm also a former school board member.
Ernie Jetty, Alderman.
Patricia Klee, also Alderman on the Board of Aldermen.
By the way, we've picked our construction manager, as you can see, and it's Harvey Construction. I'm Rick Dowd. I'm City Alderman, and I'm also Chair of the Joint Special School Building Committee. And I won't go through my history. It's pretty long.
Laurie Wilshire, Board of Aldermen.
Ray Garino, Board of Education.
Heather Raymond, Board of Education.
Dottie Oden, Board of Education.
Mr. Moser?
Board of Education, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, so if you would introduce your team, and then you can head right out.
Mike Hanson with the H.L. Turner Group, lead civil engineer.
Steve Caulfield with H.L. Turner Group, mechanical engineer.
Bill Hickey, H.L. Turner Group, project manager.
Doug Proctor with H.L. Turner, head of architecture.
Tom Betteridge, H.L. Turner Group, mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
Can you step up to the
I can
mic?
introduce them.
We're going to introduce.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. This is Tom Betteridge, another mechanical engineer with our firm. Tish Lewis with Tish Lewis Design. She'll be handling interiors if we're selected. Avery Hagman, and she's head of our marketing department. And we have John Pierga, he's our electrical engineer, and Dan Hall, another architect with our group.
Okay.
So Bill Hickey again, thank you very much for having us. We're excited to be here, really excited about this project. Just going to run through a PowerPoint real quick. Project team. So you can see we brought quite a team with us tonight. And, team's very important. H.L. Turner Group, we're a full-service A&E firm headquartered in Concord, New Hampshire. We do everything in-house design-wise except for electrical engineering. So that's why we have BLW here tonight. John will be helping us hopefully with electrical and life safety. You can see below we've teamed on 28 projects in the last 7 years, so we have quite a team that we've worked with in the past, and we've been working recently with Tish to do some interiors, and she does wonderful work, and we're happy she's on our team. And I guess we can change construction manager from to be determined to Harvey Construction, so congratulations to Harvey.
I should have done that.
Should have done that. So you can see we got all dressed up and put on ties, and we had pictures taken, but this is our team. The maroon indicates H.L. Turner employees, and I think we're a little bit different than a lot of the other firms out there. We're a full-service A&E, and we've added John and Tish to our team, as you can see. This is just a partial list of current school projects that are either under design or construction. We wanted to note H.L. Turner over the years, we've been in business just over 20 years, has done about 114 public school projects throughout New England. And this is just a quick list. I'm not going to run through them real quick, or I'm not going to run through them at all, but just a list of projects that are either, like I said, under design or under construction. This is the Auburn Village School, Auburn, New Hampshire, just outside of Manchester, about a $14 million project, successful bond vote last year, under construction with construction manager on the project. This is another school working on right now, Hampton Academy. Sorry, but
keep going.
I'm talking quick. Hampton Academy, it's a middle school project in Hampton, New Hampshire, and it's about a $27 million renovation and addition project. The addition was recently completed and turned over to the school, and now we're on to the fun part, the renovation on the project.
Sorry. So this is a floor plan of Hampton Academy, and Hampton is kind of similar to the Elm Street School in that it went through the same construction periods. It has the original 1930s school, has actually a 1961 addition, and then it had a 1978 addition. We actually removed the 78 addition because part of the big ideas which we developed with the school district was inclusion. The 78 addition was a lower addition away from the rest of the student body, so they wanted to bring that student body into the rest of the school. They do teaching teams there, so they wanted to organize the teams into groups of 4. So we had 1 science room and 3 classrooms, so that makes 1 team. So every science room is directly adjacent to its classrooms. Gathering space, so the teams can actually get out into a larger space as a group here in the Knuckle and meet as 1 large group of about 70 to 80 kids. This, again, is a middle school. They also wanted updated efficient systems, so we basically have gone through the whole school. Everything is new in the school. There's a new envelope, new windows, new everything. And then reuse. This is the old gymnasium right here, and actually what we did is we're constructing corridors down the sides of the old gymnasium and turning that into a 560-seat auditorium with a new lobby out front. So it's actually a 3-level school, so you're only looking at 1 level of it, but we've actually been able to go through and reuse the existing building and incorporate a new program into the existing building. These are just a list of the features which actually kind of aligned with the features that you listed in the RFP, where we have totally new spaces. We improved the space adjacency and organization. We have new parking, sidewalks, parent drop-off lanes, porous paving for water control on the site. We have new secure intruder-resistant entrances, and we actually set the building up with 2 entrances. So there's a visitor entrance, but there's also a student entrance. That student entrance gets locked down after a certain point in the morning, and nobody can get in there. They can only go through the visitor entrance. So we took the visitor entrance into the older part of the school, into the new lobby. We updated the interiors, new sound attenuation throughout the building so they don't have a lot of sound bouncing around. And there's also good sound protection between classrooms. New 30-year roof systems, new displacement dehumidification ventilation system throughout the building, new AC in some spots, new AC in the new auditorium, new restrooms, new kitchen caf, new equipment in the kitchen, new electrical service, and high efficiency lighting, new fire alarm, and passive and active intruder security features and access control throughout the building. So we've actually set up systems so they can determine if they want to go into lockdown or if they want to vacate the school if something happens. And new data clock and phone systems. So your main design objectives were to improve the visual and acoustical separation between the commons and the classroom spaces as you listed, improve ventilation, fully functional mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, improve the lighting, light and safety features. I mean, we're the 5th group doing this, so you might have heard all this already, so let me know if you want me to stop. Improved access control and security and adhere to the building codes, which of course we're going to do. We don't function any other way. These are some of the more detailed items that you listed, which are kind of aligned with the features which we'd just done at the Hampton School. You know, projection systems, plumbing, main distribution, lighting, DDC controls, ventilation, and meet current building codes. Some things that popped out at us during the assessment review of the facility assessment that was shared was the average classroom size is a little over 700 square feet. That probably puts a lot of strain on the building and trying to arrange spaces. The science rooms are small as well. There's also the question of the existing Elm Street school is big. So right now we're limited to 63,500 square feet for a max area, fire area within the building. So we'd have to introduce firewalls somehow within the building. And then you're also over by 1 story of height. But you know, sometimes that can be overcome with just grandfathering. You also have the tile mastic issues and the accessibility issues within the building. So these are this is what you listed as your durability requirements for the building. So, you know, superstructure 100-year, roof system 30 years, building envelope 40 to 10, you know, this is all in line with what we've been doing. Interior finishes and electrical systems and mechanical systems for 40 years. So, Steve, I don't know if we want to talk to them a little bit.
Yeah, Steve Caulfield with Turner Group. And, you know, our philosophy with mechanical systems is to make sure that things are efficient, they provide comfort, and that they're easy to maintain. And I think, you know, we have a history with Nashua School District with trying to achieve those objectives. We certainly have a long history with displacement ventilation, both here and many other schools throughout New Hampshire and New England. And one of our focuses since our inception has been to provide mechanical systems that increase the health in the school, you know, versus challenge that. We like to have systems that are easy to maintain, but also easy to operate. And I think, you know, dealing with Sean and Gary in the facilities department, they'll know we strive to make this system user-friendly for them, for the folks who are going to operate it, make sure that they get the equipment and the operating features that they're looking for. We also have a long history with alternative fuel systems of various sorts, from solar to geothermal, biomass. If any of those are on the table, we can certainly analyze that, and we look at fuel projections to see whether that makes fiscal sense. But we're very comfortable using traditional type systems or advanced systems as well.
In fact, one of the first schools I ever designed was a 175,000 square foot high school, which was a total geothermal system, which is a very nice project.
So project approach, I mean, we like to take a project approach where we try to meld all the potential users of a project and really try to satisfy as many of those that we can. I mean, obviously the building and the site have to work together. That's very important. A school is really a community space. It's not just a school. It's not just open, from 8 to 3 or whatever. It's open to the community, and we really try to get some community input and satisfy some community needs. And obviously the occupants, you've got the students. You have to design the building with the students in mind. That's obviously very important. Teachers, staff, needs of the school. We try to focus on all those things and bring everything together and meld them so we come up with a very successful project. Information gathering, this is something Doug, I'm sure, can talk to. It's really coming down and talking with the administrators, the faculties, the students, any community leaders. What's the goal for the project? What can we do to improve what's there? How can the school meet the needs of the community? What's a need versus a want? Obviously, the want list is very, very long and tends to be very, very expensive. And really working with the school and the community to understand, what's a real need versus what a want is very important. Sometimes those are tough decisions, but they're decisions that need to be made early for a successful project. And then obviously designing for the future. The schools that design today, tomorrow, it's got to be able to evolve over the years. So we really look to try to design a building that has flexibility built in so that facility can evolve as the educational needs of the students and the staff change, because they do change.
And in the bigger picture with this project, because you might be looking at relocating the school, that's even a bigger thing to think about is, what is the relocation of that school going to do to the city itself,
Oh, your mic.
Oh, I think it's on. Okay, I'll stay like this. So we did go through and evaluate the programming of the existing middle school, and these aren't the charts from the study. This is what we went through and did an evaluation of how things were laid out. Oops. So, looking at it, we have a lot of different size classrooms, but it's all kind of broken up. We have the admin up off the ground level, which is probably difficult. We also have the admin away from the main entrance back here. And then there's also obvious separation between classrooms, and then all the science rooms are kind of grouped around the school. So there's probably, it's more set up like a high school, because originally it was a high school. So it's not really conducive to a middle school atmosphere. And, middle schoolers kind of get forgotten about because they're like in between, because everybody loves dealing at elementary school because it's fun to do for the little kids, and everybody loves doing the high school because it's like sports and teams and all that stuff, but the middle schoolers kind of get forgotten about. So we really like to take that into consideration and think about how they want to be in their environment. So we try to make it a little more comfortable for them. So, we like to look at, so I think probably looking at classroom size, organization, where common spaces might be, and where we create gathering spaces in the school should be analyzed. We also analyzed, with the available plans that we had, we also analyzed how these schools were laid out, and judging from the information we could tell by kind of reading those plans, it looks like they're laid out a little bit better, and you're probably into pods or teams here. I think these are science rooms. It was hard to read on the plans. And then, of course, you have your educational support spaces here, and the cafeteria, and then the athletics here, and admins and guidance here at Fairgrounds, and a new, it looks like a media center was added here at some point. At one point, you had portables back here, which aren't there anymore, I believe. At Pennachuck, it's kind of the same, similar layout with educational support, cafeteria, gymnasium, admin, guidance, library, and then classrooms and science rooms and some special ed back here. I believe that's right. So, so what we did is kind of look at between the three schools is evaluate the utilization and the equity between the schools. So from the report, we can derive that presently you're probably at 114% utilization at Elm Street. From the information I was able to derive from the plans, we're estimating that you're probably at 107 at Pennachuck and 78 at Fairgrounds. So 78 might have a little bit more space, but we need to get in there and really interview them and do some research to verify those numbers. So you take that and you get down to, almost 2,400 students, and you divide that by 3. So you're looking at probably 740 students each school. To allow a little bit of growth, you might be looking at 800 students at each school or something like that. So then we actually developed a program for 800 students, which I have some copies here that I can leave with you. And we also have a flash drive here that we can leave all this information with you as well. So probably come up with an approximately 148,000 square feet is a comfortable range with new design guide, with the 2006 DOE design guidelines and the population of the schools that you have. So looking at Elm Street School, what are the opportunities, what are the limitations, and if you do decide to relocate to another location, what are the opportunities for reuse of this building? So what we do with every project is do a site analysis to just see where we are. And so we analyze things like the sun path and the wind path into the building, because we also want the building itself to function correctly. And then analyze how the spaces are laid out, which we've kind of done on the interior already. You can just see these labeled here. We have a original small gym here, and then the new one here, and then we had the portable classrooms out here, bus drop off here, and then parking looping all the way around. And then we have this odd site here, which to me looks like it is left over from an old rail spur that used to run through town or something. And it would be nice to, if you wanted to stay here, it'd be nice to acquire that land. And then, we analyze the setbacks and everything to be able to arrange space. So looking at what a new option might be is, and these are just options. This isn't to say that you need all this space for 148,000 square feet, because we know that you're at 205 right now. So what we did is say, these are just some options, and we don't leave it at just this. We keep looking. So, if we were trying to do something similar to like we're doing at Hampton, we'd maintain the original school here, pull back, take off those existing 61 wings here, because in the end, those are probably going to cause more maintenance issues than this original building here, I would think. So construct a new admin out here, new bus drop off. This drop off might be carved into the building. This could actually be a 3-story addition back here, linking all this. You could do a cafeteria. You could actually do a 2-level cafeteria that has an open atrium in it or something like that. And then new sports support spaces for the gymnasium, while also renovating the whole building, because we know that you have bi-level locker rooms and everything, and that should be solved. And you probably have a lot more lobby space out there than you need for a middle school, although it's nice, but it was actually originally set up as a high school, as we know. And then we also looked at this out front. We have all this land out here in the front, and we said, well, what can we do with that is still sensitive to what's going on in town? So you could actually create 3 courtyards in the front and have these wings coming off the front wings there, because the way we interpreted this is that with the 700 square foot classrooms, those probably need to be reconfigured, and you need a lot more academic space that's adequate to meet the newer standards. So you could build 2 3-story wings here, still preserve the view corridors from the adjacent streets, and see the front of the building. So you actually have, like a performance courtyard, an academic courtyard, and a sports courtyard or athletics courtyard or something like that. And this small gymnasium, if it's being underutilized, could also turn into some kind of performance space itself, like some kind of black box theater or something like that. Or you could take the music rooms over there. They don't necessarily need to be adjacent to the auditorium, although it's nice. And we did the same analysis for fairgrounds. So we're looking at, we see bus loops and bus drop off. I'm not exactly sure about the vehicular patterns here. I imagine you might have a little bit of congestion happening here in the morning or something. And so the difference between this is that you have all these sports fields with the Pennachuck and the fairgrounds site, and you don't have all that with the Elm Street site, and we know that's an equity problem between the three schools. Sun path this way, and so going to a new. So we know on fairgrounds that that your utilization might be adequate there, but if it's determined that we do need additions there, these are some spots that we could look at. So we could develop a new academics or a new admin area here and come off here with performance or something if they wanted to add a performance area, and then a classroom addition here or but this isn't the only answer. There are many answers, but this is probably one of the more effective ones so you don't get into a lot of site work or impact these fields. What happened?
Wrong button.
Sorry, I must hit a pause or something. Oops. So Pennachuck site, it's kind of the same thing where you have academic wings, cafeteria, gym, specialized classrooms, and 2 portables out here. So here we think that you're overutilization. So to impact this site the least, and then we're kind of restricted by these power lines running through here and this loop that's already set up in the fields themselves. This baseball field looks like it's actually over the property line, but that's probably okay.
We own the adjacent company.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought. It's something like that. Some kind of agreement, right? So these are addition locations that we, depending on where the need is in the school, we can add an academic wing here. We can add a educational support area here. We can add to the gymnasium here, something like that, if we need to. Looking at the new school, we have done some research, and Mike's going to talk to you about that a little bit.
Mike Hansen from the Turner Group. Yeah, we did a quick desktop analysis of the new site, the Cherrywood site, just to see if there are any environmental concerns or things that would pop up. So we checked we used the Nashua's GIS to determine elevations, and then we went onto the New Hampshire's wildlife thing to determine what kind of a habitat it was, because it's one of the last big pieces of property that Nashua has, and we didn't want to have any concerns with wildlife impacts and stuff like that. From what we can see, it looks like it's a big pine oak forest area. No concerns were listed on the New Hampshire Wildlife Assessment, but the topography does have some wetlands that we might be impacting. There's the potential of vernal pools, but we wouldn't know that until we actually had scientists on the ground for it. From a permitting point of view, it probably would only be triggering possibly a wetlands permit and alteration in terrain from the state. And it looks like the topography, is kind of hilly. It looks like the ATVs really like this site. So you're going to have some kids that'll be upset that you're putting a school where their dirt bikes are going right now. So.
Right. So we went on to the city website and found this topography, and it is very up and down. And one of the things that you can end up with there, so on this diagram, this is a site analysis of what we're calling the Cherrywood site. These are existing ponds. The yellow are wetlands, and these red, based on the topography, it all has to be surveyed, of course, but based on the topography, those are either high spots or low spots, and if they're low spots, they're vernal pools. So that's kind of a discussion that you have to have nowadays, is because they become seasonal wetlands. we have Medallion Court coming here, we have the loop, and then, the double lanes here. And basically, it's a very nice site. It is in the middle of it, you're in the middle of a neighborhood. And then there's a drainage basin off to here, and we know that right now all the drainage is coming down through here into this drainage basin. It's oriented very nicely for a school because we have east to west sun going this way, and then the winter winds, summer winds, and then the winter storm winds coming here. It might be nice. It would be nice to kind of come in this way, but we've come up with an option for you to look at. Not saying it's the only one, but what we did is we said, okay, let's come in this way. And then buses loop around here, and then we have a bus drop off this way. Cars can also come in here, but they go to the right and come up here down into a parking lot. And I think there's 90 cars can fit in that parking lot. And then around the perimeter, we have two lots with 38 and 35. Again, it's oriented very nicely for the sun coming around against the academic wing, and then the winter winds are hitting the bigger spaces, which is what you like to do because you don't want you have less windows there. Set up with, main lobby here, so the main entrance would be here, cafeteria, special classrooms, gymnasium, and performance spaces here, and academic pods and library looking off on a couple of retention ponds. These are the low areas here. It actually worked really well with the way the topo laid out. The one equity issue with this is that it doesn't have the running track as the other two schools do. And we'd have to analyze that, how we could try to get that in. The issue you run into is because it is a hilly site, unless you're going to just say we're going to knock it all down, we do have to deal with some of the topography. It is starting to slope away here, and then there's a couple of hills right here that we're carving into. These fields actually work out really nicely. There is a terrace between the fields, and then the wing actually sets in there really nicely. And then as vehicles egress, they just come out here onto Medallion Court and then hit here. So you're kind of divorcing the in and the out. And that's kind of the way that laid out. And then with the wetlands, we mitigated those by adding more space to the existing ponds. So those become your wetland bank, kind of.
Just wanted to speak real briefly to presentation. These are just some renderings that we've done of other projects, and it's really important for a lot of people to look at a 2D plan or a 2D elevation. A lot of people have a hard time reading and understanding what they're being told. But if you can do a nice lifelike rendering, whether it's interior or exterior, it really helps people to understand what the project will look like, and really goes, we found a long way to gathering community support and helping people to better understand the project. So, and I'm sure everybody that you've interviewed could do some nice renderings. We all run similar software, but, these are really help people to understand what the project could look like. So project difficulties. All projects have difficulties. I'm sure Carl's assured you budget won't be an issue on this one. Budget's becoming more and more of a challenge. It seems like we're hearing now, end of this year, we're going to be hit with a big increase on a number of materials and equipment. So, that just continues to get more challenging, trying to deliver a project at a reasonable budget. Unforeseen conditions can be challenging. We have a good team that does a lot of facility assessments. Steve can certainly talk to all the assessment stuff that he's done, but, thorough assessment, existing building, the site, we feel we really have the expertise that can help you minimize, any unforeseen conditions. Everybody's favorite word, change order. We really work hard to minimize change orders, and we think we do a really good job with that. Managing owners' expectations, that's another challenge. Again, it goes back to that want versus need. The owner always has a very long very long list of needs, and trying to work with them and work the needs in with the wants, and developing a project program that will meet their needs and also include some wants and keep the budget, somewhat realistic. Communication. I mean, we're a team. The nice part with the CM, you've got the contractor at the table early, so we can really work as a team, the school, the design team, and the contractor, and it really, really makes for a nice team. Probably 80% or more of what we do is construction management projects. That's a delivery method. And we've had a lot of good experience. We just finished a project a year or two ago for Pennachuck Waterworks with Harvey Construction. That was really a nice project. And it's all about the team. We're here to help you get a successful project. And that's our mindset. We're not here to make a statement. We're not here to develop a monument to our firm. We're here to give you a good common sense project that will perform for years to come at a reasonable budget.
Just to touch on
microphone.
Just to touch on change orders for a minute. On Hampton, we're more than halfway through the project, and right now we're at 0.6% on change orders, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
And some of those were owner requests. So,
right, exactly.
So not all us. Why the Turner Group? We have a long history in Nashua. Steve, you can speak a little bit to that. We've done, I think, 5 school projects or various projects in the city over the last 20 some odd years.
Yeah, so when I started with the Turner Group in '97,
you and I,
we were working on the Fairgrounds Middle School addition and renovation, and soon after worked on Amherst Street School, and most recently I spent a lot of time with this committee working on Fairgrounds Elementary, Ledge, and Charlotte, replacing the mechanical systems and doing some upgrades to those schools. I think we have a long history with the schools in Nashua. We understand how your committee functions, and look forward to working with you again. I think it's always been some of my favorite projects we're working here.
So the folks that you see in the room tonight will be should we be selected, these are the folks you'll be dealing with, throughout the entire project. We're not going to come in, we're not a bunch of sales guys, we're going to sell you a project and then move on. We've got all the disciplines represented here, and should we be chosen, which we hope we are, you'll be working with us throughout. Like Steve just said, we've been around a long time, a lot of folks with a lot of experience, and we bring that design experience to the project, which I think really helps. Construction coordination. I mean, if you're going to doing projects at existing schools, all of a sudden coordination, phasing, that becomes very, very important. And we've done a number of projects in occupied school buildings, and we can work with both the school and the contractor to really try to minimize the impact. There is an impact, but we'll do our best to help minimize that impact on the existing schools. Full support of public school projects. We've done a number of school projects. We understand what it takes to get the support of the community, and we're here to help you get that. And then the last one, building science. I'll let Steve talk to that, but that's a really important bit of knowledge that we can bring to a project.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time thinking about how air and moisture flow through buildings and how it impacts things. So how do we make buildings more airtight, more energy efficient, last longer, not be subjected to the the temperature and humidity changes that are happening outside, but have a completely closed environment that we can control so that the materials that we use to build the schools last much longer. And we've been analyzing buildings in that way for 25 to 30 years. And so we know a lot about how buildings fail, and we design in methods to avoid that.
And I believe that's the end of our presentation. Nope. Thank you. I was one slide short. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Carl?
Yeah, Bill, can you, what I found interesting that you said is you got a similar project right now with a building that was built back in the 30s, or Doug, if you could expound on what are the pluses and minuses, what are the pitfalls that you found? We know we've got some issues out at Elm Street, particularly with some of the flooring structure. It's an old gyp plank floor. Sean, has already replaced the flyover in the auditorium with steel decking because it's been pummeled with screws and what have you over the years. So I'm just curious, what has been your findings and what you encountered in that particular project? Because it rings true to what we're going to be facing here.
You know, the old renovation's a challenge, no question. You know, the things that we like about the building that we're working on now, especially the original building, boy, the floor-to-floor heights, the ceiling heights, we have room to run mechanical systems, we have room to run all sorts of things above the ceiling. You know, we do have some issues with the type of construction, upgrades and things like that. You know, and no matter how hard you try, you know, we're going to renovate this building. It's going to be a really nice building, but it's still a 1930s building. So, you know, you can put a lot of money into a building and which is what we're doing, but, you know, you're still going to end up with that shell is not going to change. You know, what we're doing is introducing modern systems. One of the complaints we received is oftentimes in the fall and in the spring, you know, the classrooms would often reach 90 degrees. It was just no ventilation, no mechanical system. So we're adding all that, but, you know, running ductwork, that's a challenge. You know, holes everywhere, that's a challenge. I don't know if you want to speak to the design aspect.
The other thing we're doing, as Steve spoke about the envelope, is we're going around and tightening up the envelope. And we're on the outside of the new wing, we spray foam the whole outside so that we have a nice tight exterior in our cavity wall. On the other building, we're going around and spray foaming on the inside. We're being cautious of how much spray foam we're putting there because the way that those masonry walls used to dry out is from the heat escaping from the building. So we still have to allow some heat to escape from the building, but we're tightening it up so that we don't have that air flowing through it at pinholes everywhere, because it's the air leakage that really gets you. And then you know, the floors were in pretty good shape there. There is some flash patching and stuff that we'll have to do, but we didn't really run into any kind of structural issues. And then there was an internal steel frame inside the masonry so that we were able to rely on that when we did need to do something.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Heather?
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering if you guys could speak a little bit more about how, especially in that Hampton project, how you're incorporating like 21st century learning in that, because I know in our current building, all the classrooms are small and they're quarter, you know, it's not at all what we want to see in a 21st century school.
Right. So define your 21st century school, because a lot of people have different ways of defining it.
Well, I think in general, we're looking to have teams, you know, which is pretty standard for middle school, and we want to make sure that we're incorporating the ability to meet the next gen science standards, for example. So we need STEAM availability, and we need, you know, gathering spaces. We need classrooms that can talk to each other.
Right. Again, it's all an evaluation with the powers that be about how they want to lay out the school. But I would think there's a possibility to provide more free space, because what we're encountering more and more is that students are either working in groups or working on their own, and they're able to go off and just go off in a corner. It's almost kind of like when kids were in kindergarten and you'd send them off to read in the corner or something like that. And right now it's happening with the upper grades, where they go off and they work on their own laptop or they work on their own iPad or something like that. So it's all the amount of those, because ultimately usually they are coming back to as a group, but you also need to provide that extra space for the free space. And then also on the electronic side, in that particular project, there's Wi-Fi everywhere, and it's really doubled up so that everybody has, and there's actually fiber optics so that everybody who has a device is able to get on. Nobody hits any lags or anything like that. And then within the classrooms themselves, they have total interactive boards, so it's basically a large iPad on the wall. So that's how they do they don't have projection screens or projectors anymore. Everything's just large widescreen on the teaching wall. And then we're also setting up the classrooms so that there's flexibility, so that That's not, if that doesn't work as the teaching wall in the future, that we can turn 90 degrees and we have a teaching wall on this side. And we're trying to set up every classroom so it's flexible in the future. The other thing we're doing is between classrooms, they are not block partitions, they're drywall partitions, so that those can be relocated if they need to be. So you're not locked into this masonry construction, so you still have flexibility in the future if you need to alter something.
So one of the things that, of course, one of the things we're looking at is ending up with a school that's going to meet the educational challenges of a middle school going forward. The other important piece is cost. I'm also chair of the budget committee, so, you know, when we look at the cost of renovating Elm Street versus new, we're not only looking at the initial cost, we're also looking at 20 years from now. What is the difference in life cycle cost for the two alternatives? Makes a huge difference, because we anticipate this school is going to be around for another 50 years. The current Elm Street's 80 years old. You know, we want a very conservative number. We want to know what the risk assessment is, and we want the risk costed out so that we know what a potential worst case is. So in the initial phase of this project, it's going to be getting into that school and making sure that you have a really good idea what the renovation costs would be, and then we'll compare it against the new school. And after we compare the cost and look at the 20-year cost as well, how do we end up with the educational benefits of the two alternatives? Because that's critically important as well. So, you know, if we spend a lot of money renovating Elm Street and we don't meet the educational requirements that are currently exist, we've just spent money illogically.
Yeah, just to address real quick how we would assess a building, I mean, we would go as a team. We would encourage and like the construction manager on site while we're doing our assessment. You know, we've got different disciplines that would be looking at the different areas. And the thing that's nice, I come from a structural background, so Steve may see a crack in a wall somewhere, and he may just grab me and say, hey, there's a crack in a wall in classroom 104 or whatever it is. You know, you should probably take a look at that. So we really, again, you know, we're out there. We're not just sending an architect or a mechanical engineer to go look at a building. You know, we're going to have all disciplines represented and really go through that building, you know, as thoroughly as we can as a team, to make sure we try to find whatever issues may be there.
And the other thing, the way that our office is set up, it's not that we're, you know, going off into our little cubbies at the end of the day. When we get back to our office, we're interacting daily, minute by minute, you know, sometimes too much. But there is a real interaction and collaboration between how we develop a system for a building. So
another concern I have is many people don't have knowledge of it, but that school actually had a flood, and it started from the third floor down.
Interesting.
And through the walls. Now, we know, we've tested it many times, there's no mold. But, you know, water and that old construction doesn't mix well. You got to get behind the walls and see what the heck we're talking about. Yes, Mary Ann, yes, Alderwoman Lizzie Golia.
Can you tell we're also very friendly? I have a question about reno versus new, referring to the Cherrywood site. In terms of what you've encountered with the site you're doing that you say is very similar to Elm Street, you've talked about the challenges that has provided you with. In looking at doing just a straight new construction, what are the things that you think in terms of design that supports education we would get a better quality of by going new? So what would building new provide you in designing a building, an opportunity to do to more appropriately meet what was referred to as 21st century
you'd be able to
education?
form, you know, with an older building like that, you know, because of the width of the wings and things, there are certain limitations that you can try to accommodate, but with a new building, you'd be able to develop those spaces exactly the way that you want them to. You know, if we want to make an open hallway where collaboration is allowed, we can form that corridor the way that we need to. With the wings on the Elm Street School, I think they're 70 feet wide or something like that. So in order to get that free space there, you might be talking about a single loaded corridor as opposed to a double loaded corridor. And then you're talking about providing a lot of extra space, depending on how you're gonna teach. So.
Well, that, and I think building orientation, mechanical system, delivery of system, you know, we can build a building that the mechanical system will actually be inside the envelope, help protect the system, make it easier to maintain, you know, flow of the students. There's
Right.
just, you know, with that new building, you can really design it and have it operate exactly how you'd like it to. With the existing building, there's always going to be things that you can't do just because it's not feasible to do.
Right. I mean, you're going to have, you know, again, yes, you have to analyze the Elm Street School for its durability. There's an investment in preserving it for another 50 to 60 years. And then, but on the Cherrywood site, you know, you have a very large site work investment, you know, but you will be providing more equity between the three schools through the athletics that you're able to provide there, you know. I don't have enough research to know how the teams work at the Elm Street School, where they go right now, or where they play their sports.
No,
Follow up, somebody else have a question? Mr. Donovan and Sean.
So at the Hampton site, did they have another option to build a new school? Why did they choose one versus the other?
I think it was 2 or 3 years prior to us coming on board, they had another site selected outside of the downtown, and they decided at one point that they wanted to keep the school down in the center of town.
So did you price out both options? Were they pretty close, or?
The school had actually worked on that on their own before they hired us. We went through that with them. The site they had chosen, there was just a very substantial site cost to develop that site, which really was going to make it tough for them. They're a bond vote town, so they would have had to pass that bond vote. It would have made it really difficult. It was challenging enough as it was to pass the bond, but there was really that substantial development cost that really had them shy away, as well as they really wanted to keep that school, you know, where it was part of the town, close to the other schools. So that was very important to them as well.
The school is actually in a very nice location because they only have one field on site, but a block down the road, there's, you know, a park with 3 more fields. So the kids just walk down there, and it's actually really nice to be there during the construction meetings in the morning because the kids are, you know, kids are still coming to school on their bikes, on their skateboards. It's really nice because there's a lot of movement still happening in the city as opposed to parents just dropping off. There are still parents just coming in and dropping their kids. And so we did provide a parent drop-off lane there with the bus lane as well. So,
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. So once we hire the architect, we already have the construction manager. I think we need to move quickly on hiring a geotech, a surveyor, and an industrial hygienist. What sort of timeline would you suggest that we follow in hiring those 3?
You know, we're at a tough time of the year to go out and do geotech, is, you know, assuming the snow and is going to continue, the cold weather will continue. It would be great if we had a nice warm winter, but we would, you know, start to assist in helping prepare those requests as soon as possible and try to get those people lined up and, you know, get them out there as soon as we can. But survey's critical, wetland identification is going to be critical, and it's really a tough time of year to do that. So if it can be done, great, but we may have to wait till spring.
Sounds like the industrial hygienist might be more important if you want to look at renovation, for example, determining hazmat, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that could be done any time of year. So at least, and I think there is a lot more front-end work, investigation-wise, into the existing as far as coming up with a real budget for that piece. and as well as working through various configurations to make the existing building work. So it's probably more important that that get underway right away. Although, there are a lot of unknowns with the site. But you can't do anything about the weather.
All set. So whoever we select working with a construction manager, when we're doing the cost analysis, with a new school, we already own the land. So that's a big plus. And with Elm Street, there are people that are interested in buying that building. So there's a resale value that will come off the bond. So we need to have a pretty good estimate there, and I'm going to be working on the latter number with Mr. Cummings. So, because I know two people right now that are interested in if we do something. So that's what we'll be looking at when we're weighing the two options, and we want the best end alternative for the most sensible cost. Notice I didn't say lowest, because I want to know what that 20-year savings is as well. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, Alderman Jettie.
So I've asked this, I think, of everybody, but climate change has been in the news, and the effect that we have. I think we have an opportunity here to affect, how we, what effect this school will have, whether it's the old school or the new school, on the environment. And I'm interested not only in the dollar and cent cost, but the cost to the environment and the climate. And so, could you talk about your experience and qualifications in helping to guide us in making the right choice about how we how we power the school, how we heat the school, how we what type of fuel we should use, thinking of the future, not the short term, but the future.
Yeah, so there are a lot of variables that go into that, but we certainly are well versed in presenting the options for power and fuel in terms of dollars, in terms of BTUs or kilowatt hours, or in terms of carbon impact. And we know that they're all different. So you could have the cheapest energy source may not be the most environmentally friendly. And we can certainly work with you on whatever your ultimate goal is to achieve that. But also be mindful of secondary impacts. So you may say, well, we'd like to burn wood chips because it's environmentally, it's sustainable. We, have a forest resource, but how do we move those trucks through the city, right? And, how often do we have to deliver those chips, and how do we store them? There are a lot of variables with that, as well as, does that cause increased maintenance over the life? And do you need specialized training to run those systems? So we can help you through those decisions. But then there's a myriad of other decisions as far as what materials go into the building, how far away do they come from, how sustainable are those? Are we using recycled materials in the building? And we can work through all those. We've certainly worked in the past on many projects where that's been, those concerns have been raised, and we can help you either, make the decisions or inform your decision.
Anyone else? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Doug. I think you mentioned relatively early in your presentation that the current school's built one story over max height for the structure type. Did that deal with the firewalls, or is that something?
When you get our analysis of looking at the facility assessment, is that the building is a type 2B construction based on the IBC building code. And when you go into the area and height requirements, you're allowed to go to 2 stories with a new school, and then when you sprinkle it, you can add a 3rd story. So that's the limitation. So it's based on construction type. If the building was a totally what they call protected structure, so it's totally like a concrete building, you know, all the columns and everything are encased in concrete and everything, you're allowed to go higher. But that's what we ran into in our cursory investigation. So, but usually that you know, because the building's of a certain age, it's grandfathered under the code. So that's why you're able to keep functioning. You know, so.
So we're not building the Empire State Building. We should be okay.
Right.
with this one. Okay. Just one real quick question. You mentioned 0.6 is your change order rate.
Right.
That included perhaps some owner stuff. What is your, as a firm, what is your typical change order rate for just the A&E for the design piece, you know, putting aside the owner changes?
I don't have any other real figures in that because, let's see. Because usually it all gets mixed together with the owner stuff. But yes, we do run into things where we have to tweak something by ASI, you know, change a selection or something like that. But usually I would say we're in, you know, under the 3% range on A&E stuff. So.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming in. We enjoyed your presentation and your proposal. And as I said, we're going to be meeting on December 6th and making our determination hopefully that evening. And all the firms will be notified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
And do I hear a motion? Alderman Wiltshire. Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 12 after 9, 9:12.